I've seen the content creators on YouTube for very weird niches like resellers, for example. There are people who resell products by buying them from thrift stores in the US, Goodwill, for example, and then they essentially resell those products on eBay. And yeah, the income is very bad at the start, right? But these channels are they went from like 1,000 people watching to like 100,000 people watching now, and then their income shifted from as a reseller maybe 80% 20% content creation to now 40% content creation or even 60% content creation and the remaining 40% from reselling. So it's a very interesting equation that's happening where it's kind of like people figuring out that route and tech platforms further amplifying or making it easier for you to shift.
Welcome to the MHV podcast. We speak with leading founders, VCs, and operators on their journey in Southeast Asia. Learn more at www.monkshill.com. Hi, Ziyang. Really excited to have you on the show. Really excited to have you because you're doing something really amazing with commerce and creators. And I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Hi. Yeah, nice to meet you, Jeremy, and thanks for the opportunity to come on this podcast. Right, so I'm the co-founder and CEO of UpMesh. I'm mainly in charge of product here, and we're a startup helping people to become great life sellers in Southeast Asia.
Amazing. And what's interesting is that, just to start off, you studied, high school, junior college in Singapore. And one of the things that we noticed about you was that you chose not to go to university. Could you share a little bit more about that?
Yes. So I think as part of this journey, what I realized very early on during my JC days was that I didn't really have a idea of, well, I knew what I wanted to do from the beginning, right? So I wanted to go into business. I was a kind of problem solver type of guy. I felt that, studies are more generic in nature, and going to university without that direction set forth for me would have been a big no-go, right? Because I see myself as the type who will come back to university maybe of 30, 40 to double my learning, but not before I actually saw what happened out there, in the wild. And I did a lot of small ventures to really kickstart that journey, right? So while everyone else was at university, trying to figure out what kind of things they wanted to go into, like, be a doctor, be a lawyer, I was very certain that I was going to go into business at some point. And I kickstarted my journey by doing, smaller ventures that didn't really require much capital. In a way, almost everything I did at that time was bootstrap. So I've done everything from even doing, I think the funniest one would be painting services. So I started a website that essentially offered home painting services for people, and I got together a team. I worked together with the more traditional industries in painting to get people to hit down and paint houses. So I learned about digital marketing, managing resources in the process, and then from there, every venture was different. So I had one with I did box shop selling. So if you're in Singapore, there's actually a concept where an entrepreneur can rent boxes from certain shops inside shopping malls, and you can kind of put your own retail items in there for the shops to help you sell. So it's kind of like a consignment basis approach, and through that I learned about drop shipping, good sourcing from China, logistics, and everything in between. And then finally the journey kind of brought me to in tech consulting. So I did a lot of advisory for blockchain companies back then. I did a lot of marketing work for them as well, community management, essentially helping them to navigate the environment around how the blockchain industry is raising funds. And while I'm not proud of it today, because crypto is kind of like a bubble that kind of goes up, goes down, and people lose their savings and everything. I'm not proud of the fact that the crypto industry is sometimes seen as a bit of a scam, but I did learn a lot from how to essentially get communities up and running, and all of it really ties back to the problem solving mentality that I have, right? So yeah, I think that really brings me to the journey I am on right now. So it went from all the way from all these retail, online services, platforms, tech consulting, and then all the way into live streaming. This is where I realized that I had the biggest problem I had to solve, right? So there were a lot of people out there who were making a living with live selling, and there's an opportunity to really open this space up to get both more buyers as well as sellers into this.
Yeah, amazing. And it's such a contrarian move to not go to university, especially for a lot of folks in Southeast Asia. Going to university is a very big milestone and thing to do. When you were doing it, did you have any regrets? Were there any moments where you're like, oh, I wish I'd gone to university? Or were there moments like, oh, this is the best thing I ever did? How did that mix play out?
I think for a lot of people, the university experience is a must-have, right? You make a lot of your late life friends along that period and that stretch of your life. That's where it's a make or break, right? But that's also where I differ in a sense that I don't want university and a piece of paper to be my make or break. Right, I want it to be the process or the journey. And for the younger generation, what I'm observing today, between millennials and Generation Z is that increasing amount of people are struggling to find jobs, not because there are no jobs available to them, but they're not really taught how to job hunt. They are not really being taught where the opportunities of the 2020s lie. So that's something that has been a big thorn for me. So having not gone to university and still managed to make a living, I actually see a lot of the opportunities out there today which people are not capitalizing on. And the school will never teach you the realities of the job market. They are honestly not updated on it. They can't tell you, how do you get salary increments, for example, or how do you find a job that's fulfilling for you. They leave it all up to you to experiment. But when you're thrown into the job market straight away, even after getting a degree, you realize that that degree actually only matters to pass the initial bar. I've spoken to both employers and employees in this process, and it's hilarious because the employers are saying there's no one taking up my job ads, but the employees are saying that they can't find a job. So there must be some kind of disconnect going on, and it's a problem that starts from the fact that school and university doesn't solve that problem, that part of the equation. It also doesn't imbue you with the kind of hard skills that you'll realize you'll need in a working environment. So it's not just about regurgitating what you learned in school. It's about thinking through things logically, understanding how to value yourself, how to contribute to the company as a whole, right? So of course, there's also the other aspect where that when I talk about alternative opportunities, right? We're talking about, like, for example, doing things like live streaming on Twitch or YouTube, or making video content, going on the gig economy, working on Fiverr. These are opportunities that I've seen many people succeed at, and they've built up not only significant income sources from these, they've built up the skills that they need to basically become valuable to the economy. So that's a lot of what school doesn't do for you, and what I feel younger people should be looking at.
So if someone is a student and they have an idea of something they want to build, and they're like a year 2 or year 3 student, and they ask you, should I drop out or not? How would you advise them to think through the process?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting question because one of the things that I always wanted to talk about was risk management, right? But not from the perspective of finances, more of risk management around learning, around whether you can afford to take that dive. At the end of the day, each person's circumstance affects whether they should become an entrepreneur. So, if you have a family that that relies on you, if your family were not in a condition to allow you to go and in Chinese it's quite zwang. The idea here is that you need to evaluate your own life circumstances and really take risk management to a new level. If you need the income, maybe you have a girlfriend, you're going to get engaged soon, then it's all about trying to figure out what's most stable. And in that case, you can only take on ventures or ideas that either you can get funding for, or if you are confident to bootstrap it while holding a job. Right, so it's all about risk management, and risk management, there's high risk and low risk, right? So someone who has an app who believes that for want of a better word, if they cannot cope with the stresses of having no income or eating less, or sacrifices in your daily lives, then they shouldn't take on that much risk. They shouldn't go full on into 2-3 years of having no income. Right. Whereas if you're somebody who believes that, okay, I can eat less, I can take the MRT every day, take the bus every day, and still manage to get away with my job, or do 2 jobs at the same time even, then that's something that you can explore early on.
So with all of that, you've obviously gone on to work in a bunch of jobs, kind of like profile that risk, right? Some of them are riskier, some of them less risky. How should someone think about it from small business to all the way to blockchain? So how did you learn how to improve your perception of risk? Because I remember when I was a student, I was not very good at perceiving risk. And so I remember all the people who were older than me would be like, oh, Jeremy's very risky, he's very risky. And I'd be like, oh, it's not risky. I totally know how to do it. Now I'm older, and like, okay, now I'm like, Uh, riskier than I thought. And then also, there's a lot of university students that ask me the same question. So I'm just kind of curious, how did your evolution of understanding of risk change over time?
Okay, this is a very interesting topic for me. Let's look at risk from some personal decisions I made in my life. So when I was in NS, I took on the risk in a sense, but I decided that I was going to spend my off time at night, essentially working on a website that I built. I couldn't monetize it, of course. Ultimately, what I learned from it and what I did was that I gave up or sacrificed the time I had in my free time to set up something that allowed me to learn about online marketing, about websites, about how to really run an online business. And that directly leads into what happened after NS, right? So I was able to kickstart that home painting service website. It was directly as a result of essentially spending that time and effort or rather than capital to go into something. So I didn't lose anything in the process. The risk here was minimal. That's a low risk activity. And then let's look at something more high risk. So a lot of people will say crypto investing is high risk, right? So that's something that, you know, in order for you to understand how the crypto markets work at all, or even understand the basics of Bitcoin, you kind of need to know about the industry, about the tech. You can't just look at the lines and the charts and say, oh, I'm going to buy Bitcoin because everyone says to buy it. The risk there is that most people don't realize you actually need to be full time into crypto in order to even start crypto investing. Right? That's high risk because you need to spend a lot of your time and effort for something that may even lose you money. Right. So when you make decisions as a result of the kind of circumstances you're in, as well as what kind of things you can afford to do, you'll find that your life goes a lot better in general. And that risk extends beyond just finances. It's always about, what kind, if you take on a job, for example, and that job pays well, but it doesn't give you a lot of learning, it doesn't give you a lot of growth opportunities for your next job, that's also a risk because you may be stuck in that role for a while and you can't switch jobs easily because your new employer is going to look at it and like, wait, you were washing dishes for, $6,000. Like, what does that mean when you join my tech company, for example? Right? It's a dead end in that sense. So you need to look at not just the finances and numbers. During the school period, I would say even more important to be choosing how you want to invest your time because you have to juggle studies with extracurricular activities with your commitments in real life, and on top of that, if you're going to start a business, let's say a lot of people will say that their drop shipping successes start from uni. I would say that you're sacrificing something in the process. It's just how much of that to you is acceptable.
And what's interesting is that there's not only just risks that you're managing. And I think what I like about what you're saying is that you basically learn how to manage risk by taking on risk over time.
Right.
There's also a reward dynamic as well, right? Because some jobs pay more, some pay less, some like crypto, you need to have some capital to even begin investing. Otherwise, why are you learning or why are you growing? How do you think about that aspect, about the reward part of the dimension?
I think people need to clearly define their objective for doing something. So if you are able to see, let's say you're looking for a job, right? If you're able to see how you're going to grow and contribute in that role before you've even applied for the job, that actually gives insight to not just yourself. It also tells the employer what's your journey, right? When I hire people right now for my startup, the questions that I ask may not necessarily have a correct answer. It's not really to evaluate your skills anymore because part of the job hunting process is about where are you going to be in 3 to 5 years time, right? And having visuals or insights into that actually helps you to plan ahead for the rewards you're going to get. If you know that you want to elevate yourself to a certain role within 3 to 5 years, maybe your stint at that company you're going to be at might be shorter than staying long term because maybe that company just doesn't scale in the way you wanted it to. So for example, a big company may not do as many promotions. If you had a working for a company like 50,000 employees, they're not going to have that many C-level people or like many executives, right? They're going to have a lot of like senior, junior people who are sitting there, and that's the end part of the cycle. You would plan ahead in such a way where you gain the experience and learnings at these companies. That's your reward. But when you switch your job, that's when you can upsell yourself using these skills and tell people how you contributed and how that contribution is actually magnified then by joining, let's say, a smaller company or a startup. Right? And your pay doesn't necessarily drop because at the end of the day, the job market is, certain roles are certain price. Right? It's just a matter of whether you can contribute enough to justify that company paying you a certain amount. Right? So being able to chart that route ahead of you helps with that reward cycle, right?
And what's interesting is that it seems like over time you've taken on opportunities that are more risk in some ways while de-risking it. So how do you think that you learned how to do it? Yeah.
I think that evolves from really going through it. So let's use public speaking as an example, right? And being on this podcast is a very good example, right? When I was a kid, I wouldn't say that I'm the type of guy who goes out and confidently says things out loud. You go up to a mic, you're nervous. That's normal, right? But as you experience something, the confidence level goes up, and with confidence, surprisingly, comes a level of success or aptness, right? You're able to actually believe in what you do because you're confident. When I'm running a startup, I'm in a product role right now, but I understand why marketing fits into product and how it feeds the business cycle. And that's something that, as an insight, helps me to run my company better, and it allows me to take on bigger risk in what I do because I no longer just have to worry about, okay, do I actually know what I'm doing? You have a bigger understanding of the world at hand. So, from an experience perspective, when you can go into new ventures when you have insights into how it works. I can give a great example, and you mentioned, so for fundraising, right? That's something that no one knows how to do. Frankly speaking, if you ask any founder, they give you an equation. It really doesn't work because it's their personal journey of fundraising. But what I realized was that actually it's more logical than it sounds because I saw two different fundraising cycles. I was in the blockchain industry where companies were using tools like ICOs to raise money. I've also gone through my own personal journey as a founder, raising money through for Amesh through typical VCs, right? They both work actually in the exact same way, right? Even though they're two very, very separate industries in a sense. So you only get that kind of insight from something you've done in the past, right? You can't get that kind of insight by pretending you know about it. You actually have to go through more things in order to take on more risk.
And what's interesting is that your understanding about risk reward on a personal level is also a big part about why you've built up Mesh as well, because you're letting people be able to transform what they're being passionate as a creator and helping them monetize and make it a living. Could you share more about how that came about?
Yeah. So a lot of people would, categorize Upmesh as like, oh, we're a B2B, seller enhancement to, you're like Shopify, but for live sellers, for example. But the way I see it is that we're building out a set of tools and an ecosystem of buyers and sellers that effectively allows anyone to become a live seller. So I'm removing the risk for you, right? If you want to sell products live on the screen today, the first thing you need to do is to get capital. You need to buy inventory. You need to figure out your administrative processes. You need to know logistics, for example, right? Knowing logistics is something that I can't, even till today, I can't imagine people can figure out just by, sitting in the basement planning out stuff. It's actually quite hands-on. So these are things which, as you look at the live streaming industry as a whole right now, a lot of people can actually enter if the only skill set required was just to learn how to live stream or show up on camera. That's very accessible. But all of these other business part of the equation, figuring out how to do fulfillment of goods, sending out goods on time, collecting orders. These are things that you can't actually immediately start on. You need to go through failures, right? We effectively remove the need for these failures as a platform. So we're enabling new content creators to rise up. We're enabling an industry of people who create content. In this case, they're selling products on live stream, right? And that's really how I see Amesh's role. I need to emphasize again that live selling has made many people rich in a sense, right? It's actually a very easy way to earn money. It's much more lucrative than most things you can do at the age of 20 to 30. In fact, I'm seeing numbers that most people would balk at.
And what's interesting is that creators and social selling and live streaming, these are all tools, and they used to be considered hobbies, right?
It is still a hobby today. In fact, most of the sellers that we're talking to don't see themselves as only business people, right? So they have to juggle with where to draw the line between one of my buyers being a friend and it being a commercial transaction sometimes because of the closeness of the relationship. It's in fact an engagement. So when they first started out doing this, it was really because they want to have some influence in a sense, right? They want to go out and show people that, oh, this is a hobby of mine. I'm selling some of my clothes. These are clothes that I personally like, so I think that you guys should wear it too. And then it so happens that in the process of holding this hobby, it became an entire micro community of its own, Today, most live selling in Southeast Asia is at the very early stages where it's just small communities doing things privately. They don't. It's not in the mainstream yet, even though it shows up on the news quite often, because the essentially it's hobbyist doing something, right? But there's again that opportunity to bring it into the mainstream.
It's interesting because there's a kind of a creator pyramid, right? So at the bottom, there's a bunch of folks who are learning to get in very small counts. So it's either hobby by experimentation. And then in the middle of the pyramid are people who, it's not a full time thing, or it is full time, but it's not necessarily, a large quantum, but obviously more than whatever they were planning. So they're semi-professionals, prosumer. And then at the
Hmm.
top, you have people who are kind of like the stars who are making a lot of bank, big names and so on and so forth. So when you think about that pyramid, what do you think are the challenges associated with each level from your perspective?
So I think I need to address this from a business perspective first, or rather as the perspective of the platform. So if you're a TikTok or your YouTube, that pyramid exists as well, right? So the content creators at the top, they're getting a lot of money, they're being paid well, they get all the influence, they're essentially the major people on your platform moving most of that volume, so to speak. And then at the bottom, you have smaller communities or smaller groups and people and influencers who are essentially, you may not realize it, but small numbers doesn't mean that you don't earn much. That's the first discrepancy I think that people have. So I won't say which channel is it, but I used to have a YouTube channel. Of course, it's anonymous in that sense that you won't know about me from it. But from a subscriber count of 3,000, you can actually get roughly 800 USD in ad revenue on YouTube, which is like 3,000 is not a lot. And then for my live sellers right now, a follower count of about 30,000 is actually a ton of money. So it's not about strictly about like absolute numbers in the pyramid. It's about the viability and the access and the ease of getting into it. That's the problem right now. So, the gig economy is a bit strange in that it's very opaque in how much you can earn from it. Of course, companies are not going to publish the numbers because that kind of sets the cap on it, even if it's good, right? So as a influencer, as a content creator, the only way for you to figure out how uh, good it is to get into it, and that's the part where people need to first try it, right? Even if you're going live on Facebook for about 5 hours a week, that kind of builds up over time. It may seem like 5 hours and there's only like five people watching my show. At most, I'm taking in like 10 orders a week, but it builds up. That's the whole point of the content creating economy. So, the same goes for TikTok, right? You start out as maybe a nobody. You have like, you create enough videos that one of your videos goes viral, and then suddenly you're a minor content creator, and then so on and so forth. So these are pyramids that, just because you're at the bottom doesn't mean that it's not sustainable. And there is a formula of sorts to climb that pyramid.
And then to some extent, it becomes okay, there's that middle awkward stage where you're starting to monetize a little bit, but it's not really enough for you to go full time or part time. And so these monetization tools is a big aspect that I think the whole world is trying to build out now. Could you share more about what's going on here in terms of trends?
Mm. So there's actually an interesting equation happening. You're right. There's kind of that bit of a transition phase, a boundary where you're not sure whether it's worth it to go full time into content creation, and that part is actually the tech platform's problem. So depending on the platform you're in, it's their algorithms and their services that allow you to monetize. So from Upmesh perspective, for example, we try to optimize for a few metrics, right? How can you earn more money while spending less time live streaming? How do you increase the amount of live streaming time you have at your choice, right? How do we reduce the number of barriers to entry so that you can spend very little amount of work to get a large amount of output, be it in terms of content created or in terms of the number of products you can go through during a live selling session. So these are things which the tech platform is in charge of, and depending on the industry you're in, there may not be someone servicing that particular hobby or particular community, and that's where platforms like us or startups like us can come into the picture. I think that transition boundary is better expressed by essentially calculating how much you lose and how much you're growing it. That's something that people need time to learn. So if you look back on the past 5 to 7 months of your journey as a content creator and how long it took to get you to this point, and then you use that to extrapolate how long more, even at the worst case scenario, it would take to reach the same income as you had before, then you can kind of easily make that decision. So I've seen the content creators on YouTube for very weird niches, like resellers, for example. There are people who resell products by buying them from thrift stores in the US, Goodwill, for example, and then they essentially resell those products on eBay. And yeah, the income is very bad at the start, but these channels are, they went from like 1,000 people watching to like 100,000 people watching now, and then their income shifted from, as a reseller, maybe 80%, 20% content creation, to now 40% content creation, or even 60% content creation, and the remaining 40% for reselling. So it's a very interesting equation that's happening, where it's kind of like people figuring out that route, and tech platforms further amplifying or making it easier for you to shift.
And there's a race, right? It feels like a arms race between people trying to monetize, try to get more viewers, etc. Does it feel like it's too much, it's overheated, or you think we're just under potential?
If from the perspective of live selling, then definitely not, because there's not even enough both buyers and sellers in the equation right now. There's no company building up the demand in that sense. If you're Shopee, you build up demand by running ads for your wares and your merchants, right? No one's doing that for live selling right now. So we're in a very nascent stage. It's not like social commerce either, where the profit margins are a bit of question, right? So, the if it's from a live selling angle, then I would say that we are in the very early stages. If it's just from content creation as a whole, the rat race of content creation doesn't exist. That's the beauty about content creation. You can join and build and create any kind of content you want. There's, even if you repeat someone else's content, even though that's not something you should do, it gets views, right? So that's how YouTube works. A video from 7 years ago that's a documentary, even if you change or kind of do your own documentary version of explaining something, it still gets views. That's kind of the whole point of content creation. It's a never-ending cycle. So it's not a competition where only one person can win. It's more of a massive tournament where everyone gets a prize reward, right? So I would say that there's definitely that one influencer or streamer or success story at the top, but it doesn't mean that the people who are in the middle of that race or didn't do as well are not getting better results. I would say, in fact, that I can give an example, right? From a cursory glance, those kids who are 15 years old, 16 years old, screaming their lungs out for Minecraft on YouTube, you might think that they are just making a joke of themselves. They're probably making something at $20,000 to $50,000 a month. That kind of changes things. It's a very weird story to tell.
I guess where is interesting is also the Southeast Asia and the APAC lens on this, right? How do you look at Southeast Asia? How is that distinct or different? Is it a hybrid of both?
So I think Upmesh, what we did at the beginning was, as a very straightforward approach, we built a solution, a SaaS solution in a sense, for a local community, and it works. China has a much bigger community to work with. So their communities speak the same language. Everyone uses the same platforms. Social media is the same across all folks in China. In the US, there's some variations, but it's still a bigger country as a whole compared to, looking at individual countries in Southeast Asia. But what is interesting about the opportunities in Southeast Asia, not just for live streaming, in fact, is that people haven't noticed, but there are localized influencers doing very well in each country. If you look at the top subscriber counts of the communities or the influencers on YouTube in certain countries, you can't even search for it right away, because their names will be like in the Thai language or Indonesian language, for example, right? They are actually having like 11 million subscribers, for example, right? That kind of number doesn't really happen that often. But it's proof that Southeast Asia has communities. And if you serve the communities locally for each Southeast Asian country at the beginning, then homogenize them into one, it's possible to match or even, be bigger than that of the US, or not China for sure, but definitely contest the kind of perspectives people have about building for Southeast Asia. Ultimately, live streaming will become a global thing. The difference between live streaming in US today and Southeast Asia is that Southeast Asia, we are more community driven. So, a lot of people who are shopping through live selling right now, they are actually following a specific live seller. One interesting industry in Singapore that I've seen is crystals. So people who buy gemstones that are, anywhere from $1 per piece to very, very expensive pieces, right? And these are communities, very small groups that have made it's like you mentioned, a hobby, right? And they are willing to do buy and sell transactions within their community. In the US, maybe they have things like collectibles, they do have some level of fashion live selling. And then in China, everything flies, right? The biggest influencers in China right now, they're not just selling what they were originally doing. So for the biggest one is called Li Jiaqi, he's a lipstick king. He started out selling lipstick and he's a guy. He went on now to become the biggest influencer, and now everyone just goes through him to sell anything. You can sell cars, you can sell I think he sold everything possible I can think of lah. So yeah.
That's really interesting. And one aspect of it is also your decisions to build this tool to help these local communities do it. How did you go about conceptualizing the idea and then eventually going out to rally a team and investors to it?
I think the origin story didn't start in live commerce. So origin story was in live streaming. Initially, we had two co-founders, myself and Jen. And what we were doing was that we saw how you could essentially build growth engines in Telegram communities, right? So you could do reward referrals for people to join the Telegram community. You could build up that actual organic growth through incentives. We wanted to take that approach and apply it to live streaming and games, because what was happening in the live streaming space was that people were watching a stream, yes, but there's a lot of engagement between the influencer and the viewers that wasn't being tapped on. You could incentivize people to do something even outside of the live stream. So, for example, if you play a certain title or game in my name, I can give you something for it. And the company that actually runs that game would, of course, incentivize the influencer to do that. Right. So there was a lot of tinkering around trying to build a growth engine on top of live streaming on Twitch. But the reason why we didn't go there was because, first of all, we are Southeast Asians, right? At the end of the day, when you want to build something, you need to see the potential from your perspective. Like if I'm sitting in Southeast Asia, I can't fly to the US and serve a predominantly US audience on Twitch. I need to interview people to find out more about what problems they're facing before I can embark on that journey. So we went from that and did something closer to home, right? We looked around us at, was there live streaming happening in Southeast Asia? And it turns out, yes, there's a lot of them. We interviewed them, we find out what they were doing, how much they were earning, how did they come to be. And it was all things that was replicatable and things that happened very organically without the help of tech. So when tech comes in the picture, they amplify things. Everything goes 10x, 15x. So that's what essentially how Amish started, right? And today, of course, the approach is entirely live commerce driven. That's not just because it's a commercial value out of it, but because it turns out people watch live selling like it's almost a K-drama. There are people who watch live selling every week, even when they've run out of disposable income, right? They just tune into the live stream, they interact and engage with their influencers. So this has become a bit more than just enabling people to sell stuff. It's more of a entire ecosystem of people interacting with each other, similar to TikTok, really.
And how did you go about fundraising for this? What learnings have you got from building out this fundraising process to rally capital to join you in this mission?
I think and this is a interesting note for startup founders out there. Typically, most people will describe to you a certain journey for fundraising, or they just flat out tell you the truth, which is that they don't know either. The way I can explain it to people who are looking to fundraise is that it's actually like cooking, right? There's a recipe, you need to tweak it, you need to commit to certain amounts of each ingredient in order to achieve the final result, right? So to put it bluntly, I had two experiences with fundraising, right? I helped companies to fundraise during the crypto climate where, 3-4 years ago, there was a crypto bubble. Every tech company in the world was trying to do something blockchain related, and they just, look for people who can advise them how to do fundraising. The easy way to put it is that VCs are looking to de-risk their investment, and de-risking the investment means you need to have some kind of organic views on your product. So meaning, as a tech company, your website has visitors, right? As a tech company, your Telegram community isn't barren. as a tech company, people are interested in your product. So that's what VCs do to de-risk themselves from a crypto perspective, right? They can only invest in something that has a minor proven track record. So what we did was that we came in the picture, offered a simple service, community management for blockchain startups, where you could build up that community and show investors there was interest in your product. So that was my first experience personally with fundraising, essentially figuring out that, hey, if you de-risk it for the VCs, they come in, right? That's a surprisingly simple equation. And then we essentially, when we went into outside of crypto, it's much harder to fundraise. I'm not gonna lie, but it's the exact same equation, right? In order for VC to want to invest in you, you need to show them that your product has the minimum viable level of success. That doesn't mean that you need to build up an MVP. It doesn't even mean that you need traction, although both of those help drastically. It just means that you need to be able to convince the VC that whatever you're doing from a numbers perspective is able to reach the valuation they are asking from them. So that means, for example, if you need to prove that live selling exists, go and run ads in the countries they are targeting. Or if you are trying to build something to solve it, show the VCs that with X amount of money, you can actually get the results that would justify the valuation. And you need to prove it in a very hard manner. You can't prove it just with extrapolated numbers. You actually need to go out, for example, and interview like say 100 merchants or get 100 contracts on the table. Then that's where you filter out who's a bad founder, who's a good founder, right? People who are willing to walk the talk, go down and interview the people you're actually serving. For Upmesh, before we launched, during the 6 months or even 1 year before we launched, collectively, I think the early co-founders have done 200 plus interviews, and not all 200 interviews were our target audience, but we talk to them, we find out clearly what is the value add we're serving, right? So essentially, if you de-risk it for the VCs to enter, that's when they come in. There are other ways to do this as well, which is, maybe this is where gray area comes in, where, get supporters on your side. So people always say raise from your friends and family first. But in reality, the reason why you raise from friends and family is because your friends and family are your supporters, right? And they're willing to introduce you to people, they're willing to do certain things that gets you in touch with the right people. So I can say that is part of the journey as well, right? The signaling that having people invested in you brings, right? So one step at a time, bring in friends and family introduces you to people who are kind of more important people bring you to more and more important people, and it goes up the journey from there, right? And you just have to spend a lot of time talking and really telling them why this is the opportunity of a lifetime. Eventually, when you spend enough time doing something, it becomes a conversion number, right? X% of people will invest in you, X% of people will go away, and then X% of people refer you to the next group of people you need to speak to. Yeah, so I think that about summarizes the equation that's happening in fundraising right now. Right? Of course, it looks very different for different companies, but as an overall perspective, it's roughly correct.
How do you approach that conversation with investors about, this is what I have, this is what we want to achieve, and this is the 100 interviews or that hard evidence that I can get there?
So of course, it's part of the journey and the growth, right? So even for Monk Sale, which I'm sure it wasn't when I meet you guys the first time, and then I tell you guys what I do, that you're convinced. I tell you that this is the idea. I tell you that this is where I'm at. I tell you that in 2 to 3 months time I'm going to get bigger, right? So maybe in that first impression it seems like that's not going to happen, right? So ultimately during the first session it's more of, okay, you say they're going to do something, but we're going to wait, right? And then later on, if you prove that growth does happen even on a small sample size or scale, that's when trust is built up. That's when the you can actually tell the person on the other end of the table, look, what I said is coming true, right? If it goes on true for another 2 years, it's going to become big. And that's kind of what you need to do a bit at a very abstract basis for every single meeting that you have, right? Not every meeting is going to work well on the first meeting. The best ones, of course, the person is aligned with your vision, they've done their research, they invest in the same mandate as you. They are in your space, they understand what's going on, you don't need to explain anything to them. That's great, good for you, you found the right person, the right investor. But most meetings, you are the one explaining to the investor why there's an opportunity on the table, and then you have to prove that the opportunity exists through actions afterwards. So I would say that for people in the fundraising cycle, remember to plan out the journey. It's not your first meeting will go well. Maybe you need to extrapolate forward as to what X plus something, an amount would convince that person to put in Y, right? So that's really the approach I would take when it comes to fundraising.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. On that note, I love to wrap things up by paraphrasing the three big themes that I got from this conversation. The first, thank you so much, is sharing about what it meant for you to skip university. And that's a really tough conversation because we talked about, we can fool ourselves about the risk, we fool ourselves about reward. The second that was really interesting was talking about creators in terms of the pyramid, the dynamics, the monetization, and the same risk and reward dynamic, but more from that lifestyle, hobby, and decision making. And I laugh a little bit about how you mentioned like you and I have no idea how anybody handles logistics as a creator, right? It's very
Actually, it's ridiculous because like some of my sellers. So I have sellers who even before any tech came in the picture, they were doing an insane amount of money. People don't realize that for every 5 minutes on screen, they probably spend 1 hour packing. So in reality, they haven't slept for 5 days. It's because of logistics. And that's the crazy part about it. If we didn't have tech solutions coming in to solve all these things, you would literally have people who can't sleep and are sacrificing way too much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really good to hear that. And lastly, thank you so much for sharing, your fundraising recipe, right, for cooking, right? So, how to approach VCs in terms of what you're building as a business, why you care about it, why the problem is really interesting, and then actually going deeper to say, there are always going to be tough conversations because you're persuading someone or persuading yourself, and that there is a differentiation between, good founders and great founders based on their willingness to be able to do the legwork. So thank you so much for coming on the MHV podcast.
Thank you for inviting me as well. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the MHV podcast, please share this episode with your friends and colleagues. Go to www.monkshill.com for more founders' journeys, company building advice, and insights into regional tech trends.